Hello, and welcome to the Dementia Capable webinar series provided by the Rosalyn Institute for Caregiving in partnership with the Georgia Division on Aging Services. Before getting started, we advise having a pen and paper ready to write down any information and links to the resources as they are provided. Otherwise, you will have to view the webinar again to retrieve it later. You may pause the webinar now if needed. Remember that the link to the SurveyMonkey post-test will be pasted onto the last slide. The post-test will remain open for an indefinite amount of time. Please take it at your earliest convenience, though we encourage immediately following the webinar. A certificate can be provided when entering your email address at the end of the post-test. Today's webinar will be Begin with Good Communication, presented by Laura Bauer. Laura is the National Program Director for Operation Family Caregiver at the Rosalyn Carter Institute for Caregiving, RCI, at Georgia Southwestern State University, GSW. Co-author of the RCI's signature training program, Caring for You, Caring for Me, Education and Support for Family and Professional Caregivers, 2nd edition, Laura has co-authored numerous journal articles and contributed chapters to Voices of Caregiving, LaChance Publishing 2008, and Recreating Neighborhoods for Successful Aging, Health Professions Press 2008. Laura also teaches 6 courses in the RCI's Caregiving Issues and Management Certificate program housed at GSW. Laura has previously worked as a counselor for at-risk youth at an outdoor therapeutic program and as a child abuse investigator. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and a Master of Public Administration from Columbus State University, and also holds a certificate in gerontology from GSW. Laura serves as Vice President of the Maddie J.T. Stepanek Foundation in Rockville, Maryland, sits on the Board of Governors of the We Are Family Foundation in New York City, and the Board of Directors for the Southwest Georgia Victims Assistance Alliance, Inc. She is a member of Phi Kappa Phi, Pi Alpha Alpha, and the American Association of University Women. An advocate for social justice, the environment, caregiving issues, and peace, Laura enjoys hiking, camping, fishing, photography, bird watching, dancing, and music of all genres. She and her dog Katie are a certified pet partner animal therapy team, volunteering monthly in her local community at Furlough Charter School, Phoebe Sumter Hospital, and Perfect Care Assisted Living. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you for everyone who is viewing this webinar. I want to start off by giving you a quote that you've probably heard before from Mrs. Carter. There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who currently are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And so basically that's every single one of us. For some of us, the caregiving career is going to be something that we see coming. For other people, it can hit in the blink of an eye. But one thing we know is that all caregivers, no matter the situation of who they're caring for or why, need support and need understanding. So I hope that you're going to get some information from this webinar that will be helpful to you in your caregiving journey. So if you don't know a little bit about the Rosalyn Carter Institute, we have been around now for 30 years. Everything we do is to support caregivers. And it doesn't matter if you're a family caregiver, a professional caregiver, or a volunteer caregiver, all caregivers need support. We do this by establishing local, state, national, and international partnerships committed to building quality long-term home and community-based services. Now, this is the real reason I wanted to do this webinar. This is a picture of my father, Daniel Bauer, and me 60 years ago when I was a baby. My father was an extremely intelligent man. He was Assistant Chief of the Atlanta Regional Center for the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. But unfortunately, in his later years, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. He lived for about 10 years with the disease, and it was the hardest thing that my family has ever had to deal with, and mistakes were made. My sisters are both nurses. I have two sisters, and I've been at the Rosalyn Carter Institute for 20 years, but still we were not prepared. And we did not live with him full time at this time, but our mother did. And she had a lot of issues around communication, and that's why I want to bring this information to you. We shared this information with her, and hopefully it made a difference, and I hope that it will for you as well. So I want to start off by asking some questions. Does it seem that your loved one has changed the way he or she now communicates? Does your loved one seem to get their words mixed up a lot lately? Does your loved one seem to talk more or less than usual? Well, communication is an important part of our lives. We communicate to express our needs, wants, emotions, preferences, and ideas. Some forms of dementia destroy cells in the parts of the brain that control the language process. It may make it difficult for your loved one to find the right words or to say complete sentences. The disease may also cause memory loss. Sometimes your loved one may actually be appearing to lie to you. However, he or she actually is making things up to try to hide their memory loss. Left unable to express their needs and wants, your loved one may become agitated or even aggressive. So let's talk about causes and common symptoms. You really need to rule out other possible causes of the communication breakdown. It could be physical discomfort or illness, depression. They just don't feel well. They could have mouth problems, blisters, sores, dentures might be bothering them, vision or hearing impairments that you were previously unaware of. It could be the environment. There just could be too many distractions, and that's making it harder for them to concentrate. So recognize things that are caused by the dementia. There are going to be changes in ability to think and to make decisions. There are changes in your ability to focus and to pay attention. There will be changes in the ability for someone to find the right words to communicate. And sometimes with dementia, a person will go back to using their first language. If English is not their first language, they may revert back to German or Spanish or whatever their first language was. That's just part of the disease process. Other common symptoms are they have a hard time finding the right words. They might use general language or descriptions. They might use another word that sounds similar to the word they're trying to say, or they might just make up a totally new word. They may have a hard time remembering personal information. And that could include other people living in the same household. It could be you. It could be any family member or friend. They may have a hard time understanding different meanings for the same word. They may have a hard time putting together sentences in a logical and clear manner. They may have a hard time following the storyline, whether it's in a book, on TV, movies, whatever. They just might not be able to follow that storyline the way they used to. They may have a hard time talking about recent events and activities. They might talk a lot about things that happened 30, 40, 50 years ago and remember that in pretty vivid detail, but they have a hard time with the recent events and activities. They may have a hard time focusing on what other people are saying around them. They may have a hard time following conversations or instructions that they're given. They may start using hand motions and body language to communicate. They may have a very hard time understanding humor. They might read something, and as soon as they read it, they forget what they had read. They may forget names of people. They may repeat themselves, and they may lose their train of thought. These are all very common things to happen as part of the disease progression. So you can plan ahead. Many things might affect their ability to communicate. So before you start speaking to them, make sure they can see you. Speak face-to-face with them. stand or sit at just below their eye level. This is going to help because he or she won't have to lean back to look at you during the conversation. Get their attention before you start speaking to them. Before you start talking, do they know who you are? Touching their hand might help get their attention. Avoid touching them from behind so that you don't startle them or surprise them. Once you have their attention, respect their personal space. Take a step or two backwards. Make eye contact with them, but try not to stare at them. You want to make sure that they're seeing your eyes and you're seeing their eyes, but don't stare at them. Now, this is really the most important thing to do when communicating with your loved one. Keep it super simple. Not just simple, but super simple. Try to keep each sentence that you say to them to 10 words or less. You really need to speak clearly and very slowly. Count to 5 before beginning the next sentence. I'm going to give you an example of this. You might say something like, "Grandpa, the wedding guests are here." Then you're going to count to 5 silently. And then say, "Come with me to the living room." Count to 5 again. Say hello to the guests, Grandpa. So again, just break it down into small segments, 10 words or less, and make sure between each sentence you give a little space there so that they have time to comprehend before you start talking again. After you ask a question, make sure you're giving them a minute or two to think about it. If they don't answer, you can gently ask the question in a different way. Add hand motions in if possible. So an example of this is, "Are you thirsty, Grandpa?" Again, count for a few seconds. "Grandpa, do you want to drink coffee?" And here you might point to the coffee so they can make that connection. Or tea, point to the tea. Point to the drink you want, Grandpa. So that's a good way to handle that. Your loved one may read lips to better understand what you're saying. So let them see your lips. Don't cover your mouth or put your hand under your chin. You want them to be able to see your mouth and to see it moving. Do they seem unable to follow what you're saying still? Help them to understand what you're talking about. Try to avoid using pronouns such as he, she, it. Use the name of the person instead. An example of this is, "Mama and Grandma say they will bring your clothes," instead of, "They said they will bring them for you." So again, put the names in there so that they can start identifying who it is you're talking about. Choose your words very carefully. Try not to use words that have more than one meaning. An example of this is, say, "You are correct, Grandpa," instead of, "You got it, Grandpa." When your loved one's vocabulary starts to lessen, try to use the words that they are most familiar with or that they use often. An example, instead of saying he needs to use the bathroom, he might say he needs to pee. So just go with whatever term he is using that he's comfortable with. If you have to use unfamiliar words, explain them. An example of this would be, sticking with using Grandpa, "My bandmates are coming over for a rehearsal, Grandpa." Again, pause for a few seconds. "We will practice songs for Aunt Elena's wedding party." Try to use sentences without adding a question at the end. Otherwise, your loved one will have a hard time understanding what you're trying to say. An example, avoid saying, You do want to go for a walk, don't you? And instead say, the weather is nice outside. Let's go for a walk. So again, try not to put a question on at the end of anything that you're saying. Also, avoid starting sentences with, do you remember? Now, we know that they're having trouble with memory when they have dementia or Alzheimer's disease. And it's just part of our nature. We go around our whole lives saying, do you remember this? Do you remember that? So you're not doing it on purpose. But if you're starting a sentence with, do you remember, and they don't remember, then that could get them upset or agitated. They might get confused about what you are trying to get them to do. And they might be thinking, what am I remembering? What am I even doing? So really try not to ever start a sentence with, do you remember? Do you need to give your loved one instructions? If you do, try to break them down step by step. Keep each step to 10 words or less. As the disease progresses, you might need to reduce it to 5 words or less. Another thing you can do is you can show your loved one how to do it. You can act it out. Use props. Get creative. You can use a doll, a pillow, whatever is around. But if they see you moving, kind of think of it like the game charades. They might start to be able to put it together if you're acting it out. After you explain each step, stop. Remember to count to 5. Ask your loved one to do just that step before you move on. Even if they say, I know, say, great. Please show me how to do it. So give them a time to respond. Give them time to answer and to do what they need to do. An example of this is avoid saying, it's 9 o'clock, Grandpa, let's jump into bed. That might be confusing. Instead say, it's 9 o'clock, Grandpa. Count your 5 seconds. And then say, it's time for you to go to bed. And like I said previously, if your loved one's first language is not English, they might have spoken English fluently for decades. But memory loss might cause them to use their first language instead. It's kind of bringing them back to a previous time, and that might be what they're remembering. So you can help your loved one communicate by using signs with pictures. Now, you might get frustrated when communicating with your loved one. That's going to happen. I guarantee it's going to happen. But address it as soon as you notice it. You can do some deep breathing exercises. If you need to excuse yourself from the room for a few minutes. If it's safe to leave them alone, then leave the room. Get yourself back together. Get yourself calm, and then come back in a few minutes and try again. Make sure your words, body language, and tone of voice all communicate the same message. A very, very important thing to remember is to respect your loved one. It's easy to get irritated and frustrated, but some things we know are triggers and can make it worse. So on top of using short and simple sentences, do not use baby talk. I've seen this so many times, and it's always bad. So really try not to use baby talk, even if they on some level are seeming to be acting that way. You don't talk to them that way. So don't say things like, want num-num? Instead, say, do you want to eat a banana? So remember, this is an adult, and you need to talk to them in shorter sentences and give lots of space in between the sentences, but don't use baby talk. Use positive language instead of criticism. This is when we had a problem with our mother at the very beginning. She wasn't used to him not being able to do things, and so she got a little harsh, and she would roll her eyes and say things that made him feel bad. So don't say things like, how many times do I have to tell you to take your bath? Instead, frame it like this. It's time for you to take your bath. Use their name. Unless you're the spouse or partner, use your loved one's name instead of a term of endearment, like honey, dear, love, sweetie. Use their name. With Dad, it worked really good. Instead of me saying Dad, I'd say Daniel, because that's his name. He responded to that. Instead of bossing your loved one around, allow them some decisions, even if you just have to limit it to 2 choices. Yes, it's faster and easier for you just to boss them around and to do it and to tell them what to do. But you have to remember, this person has lost a lot of their identity, and you need to give them something. You need to give them the right to make some decisions. Even if it makes getting ready take 10 times longer, it really doesn't matter because you're giving them some independence, and that's so vitally important. So I'll give you an example of this. Instead of saying, no, you can't wear shorts today. Are you crazy? It's cold outside. Instead say, the weather is 30 degrees today. It's very cold. Give your space of your 5 seconds. And then follow that up with, do you want to wear jeans today? You might want to point at the jeans. Or corduroy. Point to the corduroy. Point to which one you want to wear today. So do you see what I'm saying? You're giving them choices, but you don't want to open up the closet and they'll be looking at everything in there. You know it's cold and they need to either have jeans or corduroy pants on, so put those 2 things out and then present it like you're letting them decide. You're letting them have some control in the situation. Very, very important. Give your full undivided attention when your loved one speaks. I know it's going to be hard to do, but really try not to look at your watch or check your text messages. They're going to know you're not listening if you do those things. You know how you feel if you're talking to somebody and they look down at and they start texting while you're talking. You know you're not being heard. Well, they're going to feel the same way, so really try not to do those things. Think about what your loved one is trying to say without interrupting or finishing their sentences for them. This is another one Mom had a lot of trouble with because it's faster to get to the end of the story if you finish it for them. It doesn't matter if it takes them 10 minutes to say what would normally take a minute. Let them say it. Give them some control. If there are other people around, your loved one might look to you for help. In that case, it would be okay for you to help them finish the sentence, but wait for that cue from them. They'll let you know. They'll kind of look at you like, and the rest of it was, and then you come in and pick up and you finish the sentence. If they're just moving slow with it and talking very slow, but they're enjoying talking and having the conversation, let them have that moment. Let them tell the story. Doesn't matter if the facts are accurate or not. Another thing that's easy to do, my mom would say, but that's not the way you told it before. Remember you said this, this, this. Well, he doesn't remember how he said it before. So if he tells it 10 times and he tells 10 different versions, you've got to meet them where their reality is and just be cool with that. Just be fine with that. Don't get short with them. Don't roll your eyes. Now, these to me are 2 of the most very important things to remember about respect. Are you discussing with someone else about your loved one's health or welfare? If you are, be very careful. Your loved one may not be communicating very well. They may not even be talking hardly at all. Doesn't mean they still can't hear. You've got to be careful what you say in their presence. Are you discussing with someone else things you don't want them to hear? Again, be very careful. Just because they're being non-communicative doesn't mean they can't hear, doesn't mean they can't feel. And there'll be some of this left until the very end of life for all of us. So you don't want to be laying in a bed and have somebody talking about the mess that you just made in the bathroom because you weren't able to get to the bathroom on time, because it's going to be embarrassing. And you can tell by the look on someone's face if that type of conversation is going on. They're going to look upset. They may cry. And it's because they've overheard what was being said, and it was something that made them feel bad. So be very, very, very careful. Don't assume they're asleep either. Just don't talk about the person in front of them, unless it's something positive that you don't mind them hearing you say. But if you've got other things to say that might be negative or might make them look bad, if they were to hear it, just avoid saying it altogether. Make sure you're in a different part of the house if you feel like you have to say it to somebody. Take it to another room. You need to keep in mind your loved one's lifelong routines. They may find comfort and security in familiar routines, especially in times of stress. If you need to communicate something important to your loved one, try to avoid disrupting their routines. So an example of this might be, there's been a death in your loved one's immediate family. You and the rest of the care team decide it's important to tell him about it. Avoid waking him up in the middle of the night to tell him, even if that's when the death occurred. Wait until he's completed his morning routines, gotten his bath, had his breakfast, whatever that routine is. Wait until they are settled into the routine the next day, and then gently break the news to them. Don't feel like you have to bring stuff to them immediately. Their sense of time is a little off anyway, and it's not going to make any difference when they hear it. It's going to be a hard enough thing to tell, but if you wake them up in the middle of the night, they're going to be very disoriented, and they may not understand what you're saying, and it's going to make them scared and frightened. So don't do that. Also, this is very, very important. Just like with little kids, with toddlers, you got to pick your battles. Otherwise, you're going to be in battles constantly, and you can't do that. Remember, the things that they're doing that are different, the things that are aggravating and frustrating you, it's all part of their disease process. They can't help these changes. They don't like the changes either. But, you've got to really be careful here and not try to make everything an issue. Does your loved one keep saying that they've done something and you know they haven't done it? That can be really irritating, but just drop it. Drop the issue for a few minutes. You could come back in a few minutes and bring it up again in a slightly different way. Again, it's all about picking your battles. An example might be that Grandpa insists he's already had his lunch. You know that he hasn't. So drop the issue. He's saying, I had my lunch. I remember I did. I remember what I ate. Just let it go. About 30 minutes later, come back in. Just offer him a piece of a sandwich, a slice of fruit or something, so that he's getting some nutrition. My dad did the opposite of this. He would eat his breakfast, and 5 minutes later, he'd come in the kitchen and say, I want my breakfast. And my mom would say, well, you just ate 5 minutes ago. Don't you remember? Well, no, he doesn't remember. And there she's adding that on at the end of a sentence, which, we already know that's not a good thing to do because it makes him feel frustrated at that point. And so just approach it in a different way. Well, I think you might have had a little bit of something to eat already, Dad. Let's wait just a few minutes, and then I'll have a snack with you. And maybe it will be lunchtime before they bring it back up again, and then it will be time to eat again. So as long as they're getting some food and they aren't overeating, just let the small stuff go and just don't worry about it. Now, they may be talking as if they have hallucinations, and that means seeing things that aren't there. Or they might be having delusions, believing things that aren't true. So if these things happen, especially the first time, it's going to be very frightening when they say that they see their mother, and their mother is in the room with you, and she's sitting over in the corner. They're seeing that. Never argue with a person, and don't make fun of them. Don't say, and I've heard people do this, don't say, well, what, are you crazy? Your mother died 50 years ago. Obviously, that's going to do nothing but get them upset. And it could go two ways. It might get them upset where they cry. It might get them mad and angry, and you don't want that either. You don't want either one of those things. Don't make fun. Don't argue. If it's not upsetting them, and in most cases it's not upsetting them, they're happy they see their mom in the room. Just drop the issue. Go along with it. You might even say, "Oh, I do see her over there." Remember, it's not about facts and reality at this point. It's about being in there with them and what their reality is. So just stay calm, take your deep breath, and just go with it. He may even have a conversation with mom in the corner, and that's fine. Just let him do it. If it's making him happy or her happy to do that, just roll with it and just drop it. Now, another battle is if they're not following your instructions correctly. So you need, again, just decide how much it really matters that they do it exactly the way that you want them to. If it doesn't matter, just let it go. It's no biggie, just let it go. But if it does matter and they really need to do what it is you're telling them, and they need to do it the way that you're telling them to do it, just take them by the hand. Show them how to do it. Do it together. And I love the look on this lady's face because, she's engaged and she's happy. When you go for someone's hand and you're in there with them in the trenches, no matter what's going on, they're going to feel supported and loved. So you've got these two options. Just let it go or take them by the hand and show them how to do it. Show them that you're a team and you can get through this together, whatever it is that you're needing to get done that day. I want to talk a little bit about some specific strategies of how to communicate depending on the ability. So we're going to start with high ability level and go down to medium ability level and then to the lower ability level because you approach things differently depending on where your loved one is with their memory issues, with their dementia. So let's talk first about high abilities. So is your loved one's attention wandering when you're trying to speak or give them instructions? Well, the first thing to do is to check for distractions, such as the TV's on in the background. They may have a hard time filtering that out. So just turn it off. That's an easy way to deal with that distraction. But there could be any number of other distractions. Just look around, see what distractions are going on, and try to reduce those things. Does your loved one seem to have a hard time following what's being said? You might try repeating what was just said in a slightly different way. You can add in some prompts here. I'll give you an example. Mom said it's supper time. Count to 5. Let's go to the kitchen to eat supper, Grandpa. So that's a good example of how you would do that. Just add some prompts in. Does your loved one often lose his or her train of thought? Just like I said earlier, give them time to continue talking. Nobody's in a rush here. Let them take as long as they need to. Give them time to collect their thoughts. Now, if they don't say anything after a couple of minutes, you can gently give some prompts. You might want to ask a follow-up question even. An example of this would be, you were saying you used to play music at parties, Grandpa. Count. Did you play the guitar? Count. Or did you play the piano? So again, you can do follow-ups, you can give prompts, but don't do it immediately. Don't say, did you play the guitar or the piano or did you play something else? You've got to slow it down. And, they're having a hard time following things. So by doing it very slowly and giving them a chance to respond before you ask a follow-up, that's going to be very, very, very helpful. It's going to cut down on your frustration too and their frustration. Has your loved one started using general words like, I want that thing, you know what I mean? And they might maybe pointing just at anything out in the air. I want that thing, you know what I mean? Or they might describe things instead of using the words for them. Again, always avoid making fun of them. The dementia might have reduced their vocabulary, but you can help them with it. You can repeat what they said using the correct word. Here's an example. Grandpa says, I want the thing you sit in push, and then you go back. And you might say, wow, Grandpa, you're good at describing things. Count to 5. You want the thing you sit in, push, and you go back. Count again. Let me think. Count again. I know you want the recliner. Count again. We are a great team, Grandpa. So you can see it's going to take patience and it's going to take extra time, but by putting those pauses in there, you're giving them time to think, giving you time to think too about what it might be that they're describing. So never try to rush the process. That can really get people agitated if you're trying to rush them towards something. So really try not to do that. So now let's talk about some communication challenges and strategies for if your loved one has moderate abilities. So do they seem quieter than usual when there are other people around? Something to think about. They might be embarrassed that they're having trouble communicating. They may have been a big talker before they got ill. And so it's really different for you to see them being quiet. So it may have to do with it, that they have nothing to say, but it might be that they're embarrassed and they don't want your friends or other family members, whoever might be around in the house or wherever you might be, they might be embarrassed. They know something's going on with them. They're not really sure exactly what it is. And, they just think, well, I'll just sit here and be quiet. Then nobody's going to misunderstand if I'm quiet. So that could be what's going on. You might need to do something, like to help get them in the bathtub and that type of thing. If you're going to be doing something like that, you need to let them know exactly what it is that you're going to do and tell them how they can help. An example is, say, I'm going to wash your right arm now, Dad. And count your 5 seconds. Please raise your right arm. Thank you. 5 seconds again. Now I'm going to put soap on your right arm. So breaking it down into those little pieces, having them understand, and you're telling them that you're going to be touching their right arm before you do it. Don't grab people. Don't just snatch at people out of frustration. That's really going to be frightening to them, and you'll be able to see how frightened they are and confused. Never do that. So just try to ground yourself. Take those few deep breaths if you need to do that, and just go slow. Let them know what you're doing before you do it. Now, they might be saying, I don't know. Every time you ask them something, they just say, I don't know. I don't know. They might have forgotten the question, and that can happen. The minute you say it, they could have forgotten it. Or they might be just having a hard time finding the right words to respond to the question. So reassure them. Say something like, take your time, Grandpa. What you say is important to me. You can repeat the question. And remember, keep it super simple. Ask the questions in a way that they just have to say yes or no. If they're having trouble finding words, ask something that you can do a yes or no. So instead of saying, what do you want to wear? Say, do you want to wear the white shirt? Point to the white shirt. Or do you want to wear the blue shirt? Point to the blue shirt. Point to the shirt you want to wear, Grandpa. And he's going to point to one of them. And that takes all the stress out of that situation. Do you have a hard time understanding what they're saying? Do they repeat themselves a lot? Or do they have a hard time speaking clearly? Does some of what they say seem nonsensical? Maybe it just sounds kind of jibber-jabber and you're not really sure what they're trying to say. Again, you have to avoid making fun of them. Pay attention to what they're trying to say instead of what was actually said. Don't get hung up on the words. Look at the reason or the emotion behind the words. Look at their body language. Try to remember what went on before they made the statement. Guess at what they said. They'll let you know if you've guessed right or not. Show them that you heard them. Repeat what was said. They say something and you can say, Dad, I think I heard you say, and then whatever it was that they had said. Or ask a simple follow-up question. I'm going to give you an example of this one. I thought you said you're hungry and want to eat a tiger. Count. Give yourself the 5 seconds. Me too, Grandpa. Count. 5 seconds. I could eat 2 tigers. Count again. But Mom's going to be upset if we eat tigers. And you can be laughing when you say that and smiling. Count. Let's eat tacos instead. So there are ways that you can put a real positive thing on there. Repeat what they said, and even if it says nonsensical like eating tigers, maybe they're just really, really, really hungry and they can't find the right word to say that. So just go along with it. Be in their reality. It's not going to hurt a thing for you to be in that reality with them. I do want to give just a brief caution to this. If you repeat something incorrectly back or you guess wrong as to what they're trying to say, they might get frustrated. Don't get upset if that happens, but they might get frustrated, so know that going in. Slow yourself down. Think through what they're trying to say. And, don't let the frustration on their part escalate. You might just need to drop it for a few minutes, and that's fine. If they're starting to get agitated that you're not hearing them correctly, drop it. Come back in a few minutes and pick it up and try again. But don't get upset if they get frustrated, and don't feel bad if they get frustrated. Remember, this is all part of the disease, and there are things that they can't help. And just don't get too hung up and worried about it. Now let's talk about further on into the Alzheimer's dementia journey when they have less abilities. And I remember when this happened with my father, and he became bedridden for about the last year. He couldn't talk anymore. And so communication, got much, much harder. At this level, they might not can speak much, but they can hear and they can understand some of what you're saying. They can still hear. You might be doing most of the talking now, and they're going to rely on their senses more often. So here's an example. Tell them about your baseball team's championship game. Show him photos or videos of it. Let him smell the mitt or feel the ball. Hold things up where he can really get a good look and smell at everything. Encourage him to touch that trophy that you won. If he also played baseball and you've got some family photos of it, pull out a book of those photos and go through those with him. Pick up the photos and put them where he can see it. So you're going to have to really work now to bring things to them on their level. But they're going to so enjoy you doing that. They might have forgotten your name and sometimes even who you are. This is something that hits everybody really, really hard when their dad, their husband, their grandpa or grandmother doesn't know who they are anymore. It's the disease. It's a horrible disease. But they're not doing it on purpose, and they can't help it. So begin all your conversations by using your name as well as their name, even if you live in the same household. You might say something like, "Hi, Dad." Count to 5. It's your oldest daughter, Laura. Count to 5. Mom just told me it's cold outside. Count to 5. Come inside with me, Dad. So again, use the names, and don't appear hurt that he doesn't remember who you are. Smile. It may be very hard to do that, but smile and know that they are wanting to know who you are. So tell them who you are. Does your loved one fidget or act restless when you're trying to speak? Or do they scream and curse in the middle of the conversation? Stay calm. This is a hard one, but remember, it's the dementia. It is not your loved one talking. They might need or want something, and they're struggling to communicate it to you. So again, just focus on calming them down. See if you can figure out what the stress trigger is and try to resolve it. Sometimes the only thing you can do is to soothe your loved one and refocus them, refocus their attention on something else. Don't get so upset at them screaming and cursing that you start screaming and cursing back. Remember, they can't help it. It's part of the disease process. So just stay calm. Take your deep breathing exercises in there. Count to 5 in between things and see if you can figure out what it is. You might get frustrated. I'm going to say it this way. You will get frustrated. You're going to get frustrated. But address it immediately. Don't let it fester. I've seen that so many times where a person doesn't address it and they just keep letting it eat at them and seethe inside of them. And you know that, when you're angry and upset and frustrated, if you don't let it out, it might come out at a very bad time. It could come out and you find yourself screaming at your loved one. We don't want that to happen. And I know you don't want that to happen. So let it go. When you sense that frustration really building up, let it go. If you can walk away for a few minutes, what my mom learned to do, because he followed her around a lot, is she would go in the bathroom and shut the door and lock it. Now, he might be standing outside that door. He might be talking the whole time she's in there, but she was able to just calm down, put the bathroom tap on and have the water running just to calm herself down. So allow yourself, to just take a few moments to get yourself back together and thinking positive again. The most important thing is that the two of you are spending time together. This is a long, hard journey dealing with someone who has Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Your moments are going to be precious, and they're going to get more and more precious. So please try to do these things and go back and review them if you need to. The most important thing is stay calm. Remember how much you love this person and how much they need you to be there for them, and make it quality time that you're having with them. This is the way we want you to be looking. We want you to be happy, and we want them to be happy as well. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. It was such a pleasure. I just want to say a reminder for the viewers to remember that the link to the post test is pasted onto this last slide. Please take it at your earliest convenience. A certificate can be provided by entering your email address at the end of the post test. Please remember to view the other webinars in the Dementia Capable webinar series provided by the Rosalyn Carter Institute for Caregiving in partnership with the Georgia Division on Aging Services. Thank you, and we hope that you will join us again.